Welcome to Four Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer lives and careers on everything: countries, companies, couples, and careers. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's Four Quarter Lives, I talk with Julianne Miles, career psychologist, co-founder of Career Returners, and author of the soon-to-be-released Return Journey. Julianne has spent the past decade building one of the UK's most influential return-to-work initiatives, supporting thousands of professionals, particularly women, back into fulfilling work after extended career breaks, and helped rebrand the concept of returnships themselves. In this episode, we explore the emotional, practical, and systemic hurdles returners face and why career breaks must be reframed as normal, even desirable assets to our longer careers, not perceived as career-limiting penalties. Julianne shares powerful case studies, insights on ageism, the psychology of luck, and what makes Q3 returners different from their younger Q2 peers. From anyone navigating or managing the issue of returning to work after significant breaks, or just interested in issues and trends in the future of work, this one's for you. Listen up. Julianne, welcome to Four Quarter Lives. Delighted to have you.
Delighted to be here, Avivah. Thanks for inviting me on.
Let's start, Julianne, with your own return journey. It's wonderful to have written a book that you've lived yourself. What sparked your move from corporate strategy into career psychology? That's quite a shift. And ultimately to founding Career Returners.
When you describe it like that, it sounds like it was a very well-planned move. In fact, starts along the way. And I think actually that's one of the reasons that I came to be writing the book, because I had my own career break, well over a couple of decades ago now, and had a period where I'd taken a career break for around about 4 years to look after two small children. So you say I had this...
In your 30s, I imagine.
In my 30s, early 30s, I'd had a first career in corporate strategy and marketing, and had decided that actually that wasn't something I was hugely motivated to go back to. Knew I wanted to go back to work, but got in this real stuck loop of what next. And I spent about 18 months backwards, forwards, flip-flopping. Should I do this? Should I do that? So many ideas, but actually got absolutely nowhere. And at the time, I looked around for a book, didn't really find anything that could help me. Looked around for sources of support, didn't really find much that could help me. And in the end, found my own way back through very much a test and learn approach I talked about in the book. I tried a few tester courses. I did one on an introduction to psychology that had always been an interest. And I found I loved it. I just found it was like ignited something in me that I was incredibly interested in, and decided that I didn't want to go back and study. And this was my thing. And the more courses I took in psychology, the more fascinated I became. And again, nice illustration there, I think, of how your passion can grow, rather than necessarily being something that sort of drops out of the sky. I think there were
confirmed by the path you take, that information as you advance. Yeah,
exactly, and you enjoy it. So I went back to study, ended up specializing in occupational psychology, and then bringing together my previous business experience with the psychology, and found it was all about, set up my own career psychology practice that was all around effectively helping people to be happier at work. And along the way, as a bit of a pro bono sideline, started helping many of my friends, people I knew in my local community, people who I'd met on career break, who were also stuck and thinking, what do I do now? And it started off with doing some kitchen table workshops, really, a few people around the table, started to develop some structured exercises to help people, lots of conversations. And that's where it came from. And really that genesis of the content of the book, really, it's, round about 15 years ago. And then I just became increasingly aware that there was a need for the sort of support that I didn't have when I was thinking about going back to work, but also that all these people I was meeting also didn't have. And that was one side of the coin, but there was the other side of the coin, which is that when the people I was supporting were being built up, were ready to get back to work, they built up their confidence, they were all motivated, they were applying for jobs and getting rejection after rejection. And I started to cast around for people who'd taken a long career break and got back into professional roles, and found that the examples were few and far between, and realized that there was actually a more structural issue here that needed tackling. And that got me to co-founding what's now called Career Returners, what was called Women Returners over 11 years ago. So, yeah.
A pretty archetypal journey, I would suppose, and very typical of what you've described. And now 11 years later, you've now supported thousands of people globally on this return to work after these long breaks. How would you describe the organization's mission today, and how has it evolved or changed since it was first named Women Returners all those years ago?
We started. And I think the mission itself remains exactly the same. The mission is to remove what we call the career break penalty. That's all the challenges that professionals take when they've taken a long career break and want to get back to fulfilling work. And this bigger mission, which is to make career breaks a really valued part of a lifetime career. So I think that's the mission. Now, the form that's taken in terms of activity has developed over time. Partly as the world has changed, partly as the organisation has got bigger. But we always have a triple agenda. So the idea is that we support individuals who have lost confidence, feeling daunted, don't know where to go from here. So that's where we have 10,000 strong returner community. We then partner with leading employers. As I say, this is the structural change that we're aiming to make. So we've work to bring the concept of returnships, other returner programs into the UK. We now work globally, and that's created supported routes back to work. And then we work more broadly in terms of influencing policy, influencing government, making sure that we're a voice and an advocate for returners.
So give me a little, so we're always very interested in the systemic changes required to, because a lot of your returners will be tipping towards Q3, I imagine, and we're working on very similar subjects here. Give me a little bit of the case for companies to adopt returners, not as charity, but really as a talent strategy.
And that's the core of it. It's a fantastic talent pool.
Yes.
We are talking about people who have a wealth of experience from their careers before their career break, and also those skills that you build up when you take a career break for caring, for health, what other reasons often involves relocation, whole series of challenges, a whole amazing range of skills you bring up. And they're coming back into an organization and they're bringing a fresh perspective, fresh eyes, a huge degree of motivation. And that's what we hear again and again from employers. Initially, they're saying, we'll ignore the career break, we'll look past it. And then when they start to bring returners into their teams, they're like, one employer said the career break is the secret sauce. I love that. It's actually what makes somebody different when they come into a team, because they're bringing something that is their unique mix of skills, as well as, I say, this huge degree of motivation. They really want to get back to work. They really want to develop their careers again.
And you've helped kind of create and brand this whole notion of returnships. Is this, over the course of this decade you've been on this, has it been a dramatic shift in corporate flexibility and interest in these programs? Or are we still pushing a rock uphill?
Both. I think, yeah. There has been a dramatic change in that when I started in 2014, the organisation, returners weren't on the agenda. They weren't being talked about by employers. They weren't being talked about by the government. And now returner programs are known by most leading organisations, even if they're not actively engaged in doing one. Just as importantly, whether they're doing a returner program or not, thinking about people who've taken a career break is somewhere on the agenda. It's somewhere in the conversation, which gets me to is it pushing a rock uphill? It's slow progress. It's change. And I think we have very entrenched biases And this is a global problem in terms of still having this really out of dated assumption that careers go in straight lines and that careers typically move up. And so when you step down or step out, there is then this perception that you've somehow lost your skills, you can't cut it, you can't hit the ground running. We know there's a lot of research showing that most hiring managers would prefer somebody who is less skilled but is currently doing the job at the moment to somebody who is more skilled but's had a career break. And that's even a career break of a couple of years. We're supporting a lot of people who've had career breaks of 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 plus years. Yeah. So it's still hard of even, still chipping away.
Okay. So you decided, instead of repeating yourself over and over, you decided to sit down and finally write the book that I imagine you've been talking about for a long time. What made you decide to write a book, perhaps? Let's not be so judgmental here. But I imagine that, you've been seeing all these patterns emerge and you probably were lobbying very hard for the kind of change you've been driving. What was does the book help? Is that the final kind of nudge to get the system to listen?
Yeah. Never final, I think. It's part of the nudging. I mean, there is a finally word, I think, to writing this book, because at the point that I co-founded Women Returners, as was 11 years ago, I knew that there was a book in this. And I hit a point there, which is either I take the time and I write the book, or I start off by working on the practical change, and I'm very action focused. And so that was more appealing at that time. So I went for that, totally time consuming, energy consuming. And the years went by and I kept thinking, got to find time for this book at some point. And actually I have to credit Hazel, who is now CEO of Career Returners. And it was now 2 years ago. And she said to me, can you please get on and write that book? There was a bit of practice what you preach here in terms of the prioritizing action. And then I made time for it. And I think, real parallels here with anything that you want to do, be going back after a career break. I'm sure, creating a podcast, you've got to make time. And that's what I made the time to write the book and then put the structure in there. And it came from there.
So kind of your own returnship into a project you parked a long, long time ago and had to do a bit of work, and then returning to this authorship role.
Exactly. And, never too late, as they say. And that's,
Especially not writing and distilling and sharing the knowledge that you've accumulated hard-won knowledge accumulated over years and thousands of people. The book follows a nice, clear arc, 3 steps. You can describe it a little bit and why you chose the structure, and particularly what makes each stage psychologically distinct. Like, it's a very different experience as you go through it.
One of the things I should flag before I describe it is in the book, I very much aim to integrate the psychology principles, the whole principle of transition and change, the whole mental transition we go through when we make change, and how hard that is and how we can help ourselves, with a lot of practical examples, case studies, coaching exercises. So having worked through that approach, thinking about the journey back to work, I was very aware that there's that first stage that I call the starting out stage. And that's where you're laying the foundations for getting back. And sometimes people miss out on that and they go straight into the job search. And often that's why I see people encounter a lot of problems. You may be fortunate. You may go out there, you apply for a job, you get it. That's really, really rare that you then get back to fulfilling work. So there's this period of getting your head in the right place, getting some clarity about what you want to do. And again, we can talk, I don't mean that's being able to name the organization, the job, because I think that's too narrow, but it's developing what I call your career compass. So it's working on that. And so at the stage you're ready to go out, then the second stage of the book, which is finding work that works for you, you've got that compass there, you've got that direction. You know the direction you're moving in, but you're also being open-minded. And I think that's a really big message for anybody going back to work. You do need to be open-minded. You need to be creative. You need to look for the opportunities out there. They're not necessarily going to land on your plate. So that's what moving into the second stage, there's more of the practical side, but also still talking about some of the mindsets, mentioning things like the psychology of luck and helping people to keep moving forward through what can be quite a daunting and not the most positive experience, let's put it that way. A lot of rejection often is, it's for anybody applying for jobs at the moment, but particularly for people who've had career break. And you need to get your sources of support, work your way through that and move forward. And then the third stage is about thriving back at work. And you're a long way along the journey on that first day at work, but then you go through the next transition. Sometimes actually that really hits people in the face because they're thinking, sorted now, I've been trying to get back at work, could be for a number of years, I'm now back, it'll all be fine. But actually that's when we're going through that next period of change, and that can be a huge, very, very up and down emotional roller coaster for people. So it's talking about setting yourself up for success in the new role, but also preparing that there will be these ups and downs, and actually helping people to think, how can I support myself through that?
Yeah. So the compass, the work that works, and then the thriving when you've landed. I think that's a really nice, clear, simple structure that really does reflect the arc of people's emotional and professional journeys. And I totally agree with you. People are usually in such a rush that they just want to say, I want a job in September kind of thing, and we're in July, and it's like, you're going to take a few months or years to transition effectively. So chapter 1 I found very powerful, and you list, you're identifying internal blockers, guilt, perfectionism, shall I, shan't I loops that I imagine resonated for you. Why did you open the book with mindset rather than sort of, let's get into the kind of action you appreciate? And also give me a little bit more on the psychology of luck. I can't resist.
So to start with, why did I start with mindset? From my experience, I've seen that often it is the mental blockers which stop people moving forward. So they feel like they're doing something, but actually they're thinking a lot about going back to work. They're talking a lot about going back to work, but they're not actually doing anything. And the guilt, the perfectionism, the fear, the loss of confidence, it's often those things which can stop you in your tracks and can make you feel that it's not possible. It's not actually my fault. It's not possible. Whereas actually what's going on underneath this is this loss, these self-doubts, this loss of it's not confidence per se, but it's this professional confidence. It's very much tied into a loss of professional identity.
Yeah.
So that's what, as I work through, I actually have a whole chapter on confidence because we consistently find, we do an annual research study into the returnees in our community, and we consistently find around about 90% of people say that their confidence has had a significant knock when they've taken on a break. Yeah. And that is, it's not, they do see the recruitment biases as the biggest blocker, but actually recognizing that the loss of confidence comes not far behind. The confidence aspect is something that you can work on yourself right from the start. And I think the other thing and this is what I always found fascinating when I started to study psychology, is we have a lot of faith in our brains. We have a lot of faith. We think, often, we're smart. We know what we're doing here. We can think our way into success. And because of our negativity bias, often our brains don't help us here. And we need to balance a lot of the negative thoughts, a lot of the concerns, a lot of the worries, the fears, the doubts, to actually be able to move forward positively.
I'm always in deep admiration about our extraordinary underestimation of our total irrationality. It is pretty mind-boggling that we don't better recognize just how.
It is, and I think particularly people who have had pretty analytical, logical kind of occupations, they're the ones who really trust the rational, logical approach. And another thing that I encourage people to do in the book is to trust some of that intuition. Trust that gut feel. Does this feel, am I energized to do this? Is this something I'm excited by? And getting to value that and recognizing that your intuition comes from all the experience that you've had in your life as a research project to date. It's all in your head. And I think, again, that's a really important message for people who are very much on the rational plan and implement kind of approach.
Yeah.
And the psychology of luck. Avivah, recognize I didn't talk about that. I love the psychology of luck. There is a man called Professor Richard Wiseman, who's a psychologist. He's done a huge amount of research into the psychology of luck. Lots of really fun experiments, actually. Would very much encourage people to look him up. And he has a lot of evidence that people who brand themselves as lucky actually take actions to create their lucky opportunities. And people who brand themselves as unlucky often are very rigidly focused and miss the opportunities out there. So I think, it's not in every case. Sometimes there is an element of just things happen and that's bad luck, but actually in lots of circumstances, we can create our own lucky breaks. And I find that very empowering, actually.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's the whole expectation thing and being primed to expect one thing or another. Just like longevity, right? If you think the good or bad expectation you have of aging makes you live longer or less long. So, yes, our brains play with us in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. And the attitude of realistic optimism is another one that I think is a great piece of knowledge to find out about, because often we think just about, is it better to be an optimist or a pessimist? And it's very much this sort of black or white thinking. And I think, again, quite a bit of work has gone into this of saying, well, what is the most helpful attitude? And this attitude of looking at all the possible outcomes that are realistic, but actually then consciously choosing the best one. And I think here it's like saying, yes, there is an outcome that I'll never get back to fulfilling work. And there is an outcome that is possible, and I will choose that outcome. I will not choose the outcome, which is, it'll all be incredibly easy and I'll be back at work, next month, because that goes to, far a little bit too sunny optimism, but it's the realistic optimism. And I think that's what keeps us going.
And so a good dose of pragmatism, but a flagship optimism.
Exactly.
Hard for pessimists to be optimists, though. It's kind of a real wiring, isn't it? We're kind of born a little bit.
You do have a base level of natural pessimism or optimism, but then you can work on your attitudes beyond that. So I think, and definitely, you won't get to the naturally sunny optimist, but you can get to the realistic optimist.
Yeah. And you give, the book is chock-a-block full of practical coaching exercises at every stage, which are incredibly useful. You've got a range of pretty inspiring and, I think, clarifying case studies throughout. Can you pick a couple that kind of, what's your favorite returner type anecdotes to give a notion of the spectrum of humans you've watched go through this?
Yeah. Now, I think, let's say if I pick two, what might seem as two extremes of people wanting to get back after a career break. I think you have the person, which was a bit like me, who has lots of ideas, literally. And I think there was a lovely example. I remember a long time ago that I was coaching this woman. She'd had a really great career before. She'd taken a 10-year career break. She came armed with literally files of research, and she'd had so many ideas. She'd looked at everything in detail. But she got absolutely nowhere, because the more she treated her life as a research project, and she got stuck at that stage. The other extreme and again, I've come across this many times, people who have no idea. I've thought of lots of things. Nothing will really work for me anymore. Old job won't work. I've thought about this, that won't really work, and everything is ruled out. So looking at the two extremes and saying they seem very, very different, but actually the end result of both of them is they're stuck. They're stuck at the what next stage. And that's where the exercises in the book help both extremes through. And I think there is nothing rocket science about how to understand what work is fulfilling for us. I think there is the aspect of understanding what your strengths are. When we're talking about strengths, we're talking about your skills and what energizes you, that slightly less tangible bit. When we're talking about your values, what we mean here is just what's important to you. You know, what's important to you at this stage of your life. And those values may have changed during your career break. So it's really worth having a think about that. And then what interests you. And I think here I would caution people against, what's my passion? Because again, I've seen that getting people stuck. They're expecting it to magically appear. And as I was saying, from my own experience, but so many others, is as you find, if you've got a bit of an interest in something, pull towards it, you find out more. That's where you learn if that's something you can be really passionate about. And then the overlay is the practicalities of, how do you need to work? And it may be flexibility, it may be a degree of salary. And you factor that together and pull together, what we're calling in the book, this aspect of your return to work decision criteria. And that helps the person who has so many ideas, because actually they have a structure for saying, well, what does work? Do I really know enough about this? How am I going to narrow this down? And for the people who don't have any ideas at all, here we talk about how you can involve friends, how you can involve people you know. If you talk about the type of thing that might work for you, get ideas from them. And that ties in as well with another really important aspect, which is develop your support structure, develop your support team, get your cheerleaders, get people who'll encourage you along the way. Because I think we all need that. We all need that in life. We particularly need that when we're getting back to work.
So I think it's so wonderful that you've written this book, Return Journey, just because it partly normalizes the whole issue. It names it, it gives a process to it, it introduces the topic in a reference way. And I think it's part of this essential systemic journey we're all on to get flexibility into this career linearity that we're stuck with and that doesn't at all match our much longer lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we are all working for 45, 50 plus years, we are all going to want or need to take career breaks. And it might be for childcare, it might be for elder care, it might be for health, it might be just a huge desire to do something different. And we need to normalize that in ourselves. And I think often I find that people going back after long career breaks, they're a bit apologetic, they're a bit defensive. I feel a bit like I should, because society's told me I shouldn't have done this. And so I'm over apologizing for that. And then we find, as we talked about within employers, there's a feeling of this is the career break hasn't added to you, which I know it does, but actually it's somehow detracted and you've lost your skills. So that's what, we need to normalize and value. And I think when we realize that we could all take a career break, it becomes more urgent as a society that we actually take action on this. And I think the book is about the individual, but I think there is also anybody reading this book and thinking, who do I know? Who do I know? And they might be not working at all, the economically inactive, as we hear a lot about that group. Or it could be people who are working very small scale in a much less skilled role because they've been working around their family, their health commitments. And it's like, how can I support somebody like that to get back to fulfilling work using all their skills and experience?
And I find it fascinating that, of course, you started with women returners mostly focused on childcare and maternity breaks. And then you've evolved to broader inclusion of, career returners and much more midlifers. So I'd like you to focus momentarily on these midlife returners and beyond. What do you observe? I mean, is there something different about that group and that phase of life to some of the Q-tours that you are working with mostly originally?
I think one of the topics that always comes up with people when they're more Q3 is a lot of the questions about age. Am I too old? In terms of voicing the self out. Have I left it too long? Is it too late? And so it is tied in with this feel of ageism. Are people going to employ me at my age? But also, I do find more of a concern about doing something different. And I find that people, if they're in the Q2 stage, maybe they're looking back, they're more open. They're thinking, I've got a lot more of my career ahead of me. So they're more open to making a change, bit of a shift, bit of a pivot, which can open up new opportunities. Whereas when they're in Q3, there is more there of, I've left it too late.
I can't change now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it can make people more rigidly defined in what they did before, which can make it harder. But on the other hand, there is this amazing wisdom, perspective, and I think sometimes the lessons that people have had, because, and it could be, caring for an elderly parent, which has given them a different perspective on life at that stage. And so they're bringing even more back to, when they get back to the workforce.
And perhaps very different motivations, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I think, there's a huge range of reasons why people want to go back to work. Finance is a really, really important one. But, lots of other reasons. I think a desire for this loss of professional identity is often mentioned to us. I want to feel that I have that identity again. And we find that a lot when people have, particularly with caring related breaks, they've got so used to saying, I'm just a mum, or I'm just a carer. We minimize the value of that in society. So they want to get that professional identity back, which reinforces then their confidence. But it can be, they're still ambitious. It's like, I've got unfulfilled ambitions. I want to do this. It might be I want to do something more meaningful. It might be I want to do something actually exciting and different in tech. Whatever it is, they want to make more of their life at this stage. And so I think, again, it could be being a role model for their children. It could be actually the social side of work people often miss. Or it could be just using your brain again.
Yeah.
Again, one of the messages that I give in the book is try and get clear what your key motivations are and make sure that whatever role you're getting actually meets that. Because there's no point if you want to get back to the social side of working and you find this great project, but you're sitting at home in front of your laptop on your own, then it's not really going to be that fulfilling work for you.
So I can't, of course, resist asking if there are any gender differences in returners you've seen, and does in any way the nature and cause of the break change or influence the return journey?
Yeah. And I think there are many gender similarities and a few differences. I am sometimes asked by people, well, do the men suffer this loss of confidence in the same way? And absolutely. This isn't, again, we strangely associate loss of confidence often with women.
Drives me crazy. I know, it's such a stereotype.
Yeah, total stereotype. It's absolutely across the board, this loss of professional identity. I think, and a lot of the men who we work with and we support, they feel that they are more stereotyped, particularly if they've taken a break for caring reasons. One of the challenges of people getting back into the workforce are these stereotypes that if you've taken a long break for caring, then you're less ambitious, you're not going to be really committed. And the men who we work with say they can feel that more because it's tends to be around about 10%.
Yeah, fathers who take time with their children are seen with great suspicion in work world still.
Yeah. And it's still only around about 10% of the people who take caring-related career breaks are men as opposed to women. So they felt very much in the minority.
10%. Really, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think
on the elder care side, you would think that would be more gender balanced.
Yes, but no. The statistics, there aren't, it is one of those areas where there are not enough statistics. The statistics that we have are around, in the UK, they're around people who are economically inactive, looking after home and family. I mean, or economically inactive for health-related reasons, which is, far more gender balanced. But the caring is still, be it children or elderly parents, is still very, very heavily weighted towards women.
Okay, more systemics we need to make evolve. So let's wrap up. Perhaps I'm just curious that writing a book is its own kind of career milestone. So congratulations. How did it feel? What did you learn from the process about returners or even more about yourself?
I think one of the things that writing a book forces you to do is to pick out what's most important. And I think, when you've been working in a field like I have for, over 15 years, the start point is there's so much I could say here.
Way too much for a book.
Yeah, way too much for a book. And there is a really great exercise in just sort of distilling down actually what are the most important aspects. So I think that's been a learning for me along the way in terms of what are some of the really key messages. And I think really, really thinking back through the examples of the thousands of people we have helped and seeing where these patterns come through. So I think that's really helpful. What's it told me about myself? It's hard writing a book.
Barrel laughs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also incredibly satisfying. And I think it is a good lesson, like in anything which seems like a huge task. And how do you actually go about it is the chunking it down, taking the steps forward. So as I say, exactly as my colleague said to me, to practice what I preach here in terms of writing the book, when we talk to returners about take that step forward rather than talking about it. And I think for me, that's where the writing, it was sort of chunking it down and breaking it through sort of week by week. So again, maybe good reinforcement for myself that the small steps approach works.
Isn't it lovely to see kind of your brain in front of you on a piece of paper or lots of pieces of paper rather than all those ideas running around in your brain untamed. So perhaps again, I really recommend this book. This is a very useful guide. And maybe just in conclusion, if some of our listeners are counting themselves in the I've been out too long and it's too late now camp, what's the one message you really want them to pull from Return Journey?
The one message is to value yourself and what you can uniquely bring to an employer. It's easy to say it's never been too long and it's never too late, but I think your confidence that it's actually achievable comes from starting to build yourself up, to recognize this wealth of experience and from your working life before, and just as importantly, from your career break and the wealth of skills that you've built during that period. And I think if you take the time to do that, if you get support from other people, if you get feedback from other people, you can start to feel yourself growing in confidence and then to move yourself forward and recognize that you are bringing something really unique, different and special because of your career break. And this is such a fantastic opportunity in your life to work out what you're going to be doing to create this next act of your career and get back to work stronger than ever.
Julianne, thank you so much for your time, wisdom, and the time you've spent writing this book. I think it's going to help an awful lot of people. Return Journey. We'll put all the links in the show notes, and we'll look forward to seeing what the next book might be after this one. I think there might be a few more in the pipe.
Hey, don't hold your breath. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.